Hey, everybody, welcome to another 50 Conversations with 50 Strangers in all true vulnerability. I have to tell you, the man sitting in front of me, Mr. Aseem Giri, is not a total stranger. I have had a couple conversations with him. He's been kind enough to share his time and energy with me. He's been interviewing me for what will be a show that he has, not what will be. He has a show. Uh, and somehow, in my verbose manner, what should have been an easy hour-long conversation has turned into like three conversations of 15 hours or something. I don't know. But most of it has been me sharing with him about me. So I don't know that much about him. So it's with I do know that I love this man, and so it's my honor to introduce somebody that I love to a group of people that I'm growing to love. Strangers meeting other strangers. I guess I'm going to start Strangers in the Night, the Frank Sinatra song. It could be my theme song here. But Mr. Aseem Giri, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Danny, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing excellent. And thank you for that expression of love. I wish to reciprocate it. Very fond of your energy, the love you have for humanity, and for all those whom you interact with.
That's such a kind thing for you to say. It touches me that you would say that. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely.
I seem because I really don't know you very well, and if I were doing a podcast, I would research you. I'd give your bio. I'd tell all the great things you've done. But the idea of this room is that two strangers come into a room who don't know that much about each other, sit in the room and have a conversation and see what happens. So, would you be kind enough to share with me and with the people listening who you are and what's important to you?
Yes, with great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to do that, Danny. So, I was actually born in Germany to parents of Indian origin, and we migrated to the US when I was young. I was about 3 or 4 when we came over. And we moved to a few different cities during my youth, but we were basically within a 90-minute drive of Manhattan, of New York City. And so it was Central Jersey for elementary school, then Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for high school. I went to college in Philadelphia and then moved to New York itself and started in a very traditional career path of investment banking. I was with a firm called Solomon Brothers back when that still existed. It's now a part of Citibank lore. From there, moved into private equity, which was a career ambition of mine at the time, and joined a firm on the West Coast. So came out to California, where I've been for the last 20 years, and worked my way up to partner in that firm. Had a very entrepreneurial spirit for a while, and so I left that to launch my own fund, which was backed by Southeast Asian investors. Ran that for a number of years until my son, who is now 12, he was diagnosed with a rare blood disease at the age of 2.5. And Danny, I basically dropped everything I was doing just to focus on him. I had 3 portfolio companies at the time. I was able to sell 2. The third one I just shut down. And my reasoning was I can always make money later in life. I've got one shot to save my boy. And honestly, it was the clearest decision I ever made. I think I've deliberated on everything else in life. Do I attend this university? Do I go in this career? Do I marry this woman? All of those things I had to think about, but this was so clear cut what I needed to do, and I'm so thankful I did. My son has been through 2 bone marrow transplants, but he's now cured, and the fact that he's still with us is really phenomenal. Um, at the same time, I lost my mom to lung cancer. And so I just remember December of 2012, about 7.5 years ago, just being a very challenging time for me because my son had undergone his second transplant, and my mom had undergone surgery to remove 2/3 of her lung. So at the end of it, my mom didn't make it. But because of those experiences, Danny, health and wellness became very meaningful to me. So I became an entrepreneur. I didn't want to go back to running a fund. It always sounds very glamorous, but you have bosses, and your bosses are your investors, and you're really just working in the service of them. And it can be challenging. You don't have as much control over your own life as the title would suggest. So family was important to me. I wanted to sort of have control over my own schedule. So became a health and wellness entrepreneur. I've been fortunate enough to have founded and sold 3 wellness businesses, and I've developed a passion, or I've had a lifelong passion for fine art. I've only recently been active in it, I should say. And so I apply my time, spend a lot of time surrounded by art, and I've got another wellness opportunity. So I appreciate when you asked me about my background, for me to highlight what's important to me. And I would definitely say my children are very dear. In addition to my son, who went through the health issue, I also have a daughter who's 14. And also being in the service of others. Wellness is, I think, an important part of that. If I can use some business acumen I may have developed over the years to bring products to the market or services that make people feel better, I feel that a sense of accomplishment there. And I also appreciate that you highlighted my podcast. It's called Achieve, and I chat with entrepreneurs, professionals, people who have experienced adversity in their life and have overcome obstacles, and maybe have changed careers. And so, really, the purpose there is to inspire others. And I think this is where you and I found a lot of overlap and a kindred
Yes, yes.
spirit, because I see very much that you were in the service of inspiring others and connecting people. And that impressed me from the get-go. And I said, I have to talk to Danny.
That's so kind of you. So, as you can see in front of you, my friends, is a man that has had done many, many things and has a lot of different experience. And yet, isn't it true for most of us? The thing that really um, centers us in our life is the well-being of our family, the well-being of our kids. And I know I share with Aseem the fact that I have a developmentally delayed daughter, and how hard that is, and how blessed that is, and how so many of the white hairs on my beard and my hair have their roots in my daughter's incidences and situations that I just couldn't understand. But how, if I would look back on my life and say, of all the people that I've met, the fantastic teachers, the fantastic inspirers, the great saints and sages that I've had the opportunity to pass through in my life, and meet with around the table, CEOs of major corporations that I've sat in their dining rooms and living rooms and spoken with them. Of all the lessons that I've learned, the one that's taught me the most is my daughter.
Hmm.
And I don't ever forget that. So I completely relate to you on some many big levels.
Yeah.
Asim, what makes you happy?
Connecting with others, much like you and I connected, seeing that there are common struggles, there are common histories, there are experiences you've had with your daughter, where I can empathize and relate and relay experiences I've had in the treatment of my son, and those challenges. Just as you were talking right now about Alyssa, I promise you, I've said this a number of times to other people vis-a-vis my son. Like, I don't know who's the professor, who's a student, because I've
Yeah.
learned so much from him. And just the purity with which he goes through life, and his appreciation of simple things that I take for granted. So human connection is very high on that list. Um, Seeing my children master a task or a skill in life is also a source of great joy and happiness. And I have to keep myself in check. I have a tendency to be a helicopter parent, and especially given what my son's gone through
Sure.
health-wise. But I've learned to just take a step back and let them make their mistakes, because those learnings, those teachings are so profound, better than any kernel of wisdom I might be able to impart, which they may forget. But personal experience is, we don't tend to forget those quickly. So,
No.
so yeah, Danny, I would say those are the two things that really bring me happiness.
If money were not an issue in your life at all, like if you had all the money in the world, maybe you do, I don't know. If you had all the money in the world, what would you do with your days?
Be having a conversation with my friend Danny.
There you go.
I feel very blessed that I think as a function of life experience, I just made a promise to myself, or I have just reached this point where I tend to do the things that make me happy, and certainly financial, economic concerns are there, but there's a way to be sure we're comfortable enough and still manage to do the things we love. So I couldn't imagine doing anything else but connecting with people and being in the service of people, and thinking about wellness ideas, and bringing products to market that make people feel better.
Well, so for people who, I don't think there's anybody in the world that doesn't feel like there's something like that they want to do. But so many of us get caught in the struggles or the rat race or the wheel that we keep running on that doesn't allow us to think about anything else but taking the next step on the wheel that we're running on, and we're not necessarily getting anywhere, but we're just running that wheel. What would you say to somebody who might be listening now who is running on that wheel, not because they want to, but because they feel like they have to, and they don't know how they'll maintain their month to month bills and or their day to day life if they don't do that, and if they really did what they want, would they be able to survive?
Um, I lived that life. I was on that treadmill, or that hamster wheel, and had it not been for my son's health issue, I'd probably still be on it. I spent 18 months raising the fund that I was managing, and you don't spend that amount of time thinking you're just going to raise one fund. It was going to be a family of funds, and I was 28 at the time. I'm now 43, and if I checked the schedule, I was supposed to be on Fund 7 by now and have
Well,
close to $2 billion under management. And had it not been for that situation, I'd still be on that track. Um, there's a fair amount of it that's addictive. Success is addictive. We have that endomorphin rush, sorry, or endorphin rush, it might be. And we just want more and more of that. And we perceive that the praise we're getting from society and peers is kind of validates that approach to life, and we think this is where all the meaning is. But it was interesting, Danny, when I first started out in private equity, and of course investment banking was even worse. Just the hours were grueling. It was very demanding, and I hated that aspect of it. There was no depth for culture or experiences, and but I kept saying to myself, when I get promoted, I'll be happy.
hmm,
And part of that has to do with my immigrant background. Families don't leave their home country unless it's for a socioeconomic factor, and it's the middle class that tends to leave because the wealthy are comfortable; they don't need to leave, and the poor don't have the means, and so they come for having security. And so it was inculcated in me from young that we're here to make money. So I had to make money. I had to make money. I had to make money. This was the mantra. And so I was on that hamster wheel, and every promotion, and I thought, well, okay, I'm still not happy, but it'll come with the next promotion. So make associate. No, it'll come when I'm VP. Become VP. Well, it'll happen when I'm partner. Become partner. And then I'm having this existential crisis that tells me at 27, I'm thinking, if I have to do this for the next 4 decades, I'm not going to make it. So I thought, here's the solution. I got to go start my own fund. So I go make that happen. And then I'm still unhappy. It really took something, it literally, this idea of being thrown off the cliff to kind of come off of that. And so I know you asked me to give advice to people who find themselves in that rut now. I'll caveat it by saying it is so hard unless you go through that experience. And I'll harken back to what I said about my children and lessons being so potent and meaningful when we go through it ourselves. Yeah. And so, just being told by your dear friend Aseem that you will be much happier, and this idea of not being able to make it, there's so many platitudes out there that address that. We can't take it late, in the afterlife with us. Nobody on their deathbed says they wish they had spent more time at the office. When we have those near-death experiences, we're not remembering the deal we closed or what client we signed. We're thinking about our family, our people we've expressed love to and received love from. So those are the things I would encourage people to think about. And, it's so timely. I love the universe. I love the Mosaic. There was a friend I reconnected with yesterday who's in the Philippines, and we last saw each other at the Art Basel Fair in Miami in December. And we're bemoaning the fact that it'll be several months before we see each other again at another art fair. Turns out he has a podcast as well. And he shared with me a link to his episode. And I don't want to steal his thunder, but he had a venture capitalist on there who had been homeless for a period of time.
Wow.
And this amazing woman talked about how she still every week will spend at least a night in a tent on the street to remind herself of what that experience was like. She also had an amazing comment. She said the sincerity she found on the street was more than she finds in any boardroom. And so she goes to remind herself of that. And as she's talking, of course, I have this visceral physical reaction to that, thinking, it's just fear. Like it's sort of this lightning fear, like, oh my God, I couldn't do that. That what would happen? I think about my kids, my own survival. Nothing happened. She's fine. In fact, she's thriving. Yeah. The lessons she learned, the experiences she had, the connections she forged with fellow humans have made her this insightful venture capitalist who's now making millions. Everything is actually going to be okay, no matter how much we believe that the whole world will fall apart if we decide to take a break or come off that hamster wheel. It's just not true. We keep deluding ourselves about it. And, I know it's easy for me to say because I'm on the other side of that, but I wish I could, I'd love to convince more people.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me as I listen to you talk, how many people live either stuck in the past or in fear of the future.
Yeah.
And how in the moment right now, when we sit and think about it, well, we have a roof over our head, we're still eating, we might be isolated, we might be missing our family and our friends and stuff like that. But in general, if you take this moment in time and you ask yourself, how am I doing right this moment?
Yeah.
We're okay for the large majority of the world is okay. There are people that are not okay, and there are people that are in pain and suffering. And I don't mean to be cavalier about that, those who are, but the large majority of us that are worried about what will happen if, or what will we become when. If we would just stay where we are right now, we'd be pretty okay.
Yeah.
Let's switch it around a little bit. We're going to go to, I suck at lightning rounds, but let's try it anyway, okay?
I might suck at them as well, Danny.
I think we will, but we have a little time for it. Are you a dog or a cat person?
Both.
Both. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Would you say you're a person that's in the box or out of the box?
I spent a lot of time defining where the box edge is.
Tell me about that.
Well, I was trying to be intentionally evasive of whether I'm on the inside of that or the outside of that. Um, it's the gosh, it's a term in politics, a window of acceptable policies or ideas for the masses. So sort of defining where that edge is and then wondering if that works for me or not. I think, truth be told, I'm more outside of the box than I am inside of the box, but you need to understand the dimensions of that box before you can effectively be on the outside.
Wow. Tell me about that.
Knowing what and I guess my most readily available examples would be from the business world, and specifically transactions. So having been in the deal business for the majority of my career, you have to know how to execute or do deals in the traditional format. So knowing how they've been done in the past and why certain things are done, it's sort of a piggybacking off of the concept of you have to know the rules before you break them.
Yeah.
But the most exciting deals, the most fascinating ones, have always been ones that didn't follow that traditional path. And then, of course, afterwards, everybody tries to replicate them. But they don't appreciate that those are one-offs. It's not necessarily a trend. It's just that was unique and innovative for that situation. But those were, situations where I'm testing boundaries. I'm really relying on my cognitive ability to come up with a unique solution. Those are the transactions or situations that have come out the best. The cookie cutter ones tend to not do so well.
Yeah. I love everything you said, and I'm so happy that I dive down a little bit with you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's so interesting because when innovation happens, which is an out of the box moment, people then try to box that into a boxable moment where they can copy it and redo it, and it's almost inherently can't be, but it's
Yeah,
fun to watch.
no, it is, and you see that in the entertainment industry and
Yeah.
in the startup world. It's like, oh, it's just like this.
Yeah.
Well, then what's the point of existing?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love it.
Why make that movie if it's been done?
Totally. And yet so many movies follow the classic hero's journey formula, that's which is what every good book, every good movie basically somewhat follows.
Well, and I actually like that aspect of storytelling, if I'm being honest, because I think that for me, it's sort of a connection with past inhabitants of Earth. Like
Love it.
Greek mythology was based on this structure. Hindu mythology was based on this structure. And so what that tells me is that this is a format or a way of engaging human emotions.
Yeah.
Like these are the things we want to see, or the facets we want to see. Our hero needs to have problems. Our hero has to try and resolve them. He needs to fail initially. He or she needs to fail initially, and then it has to be this amalgamation of the experiences that they go through and their original old world experience that forges into something new. And we need advisors along the way. We need wise people guiding us. It's just I think that there's a reason it resonates with
Yeah,
us.
completely. And it's our experience. We feel it.
Yeah.
um, I know both of these are important, but for you in this moment in time, which is more important for you now? Is it more important for you to speak and be heard so that you have so that the voice and the message that you want to give to the world is heard? or is it more important for you to create a platform where other people can speak and be heard, and that you listen to them in that platform?
It's definitely the latter. The platform where others can be seen and heard. Um, that is where I draw my inspiration.
Beautiful.
That's what keeps me going. So I learned that early on. I need to be inspired, and the greatest source of inspiration are other people's stories.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I had more time, I would dive into that statement, but we don't. We'll do that. We'll save that for a future conversation.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7, absolutely. Have you felt like you've always fit into the world, or have you always felt a little bit different?
Gosh, no. I'm not even sure I fit in the world today, but it's gotten better, Danny, that's for sure. Growing up, there was certainly an identity crisis, just sort of racially, being where I was, and at the time, this was in the early '80s, where immigrants weren't, just the numbers were not as high, and so. Um, Standing out in that regard was definitely challenging. And then going to India during the summer and speaking Hindi with an American accent that my cousins would tease me about incessantly made me very self-conscious on that side. So um, I began to wonder, is there a place that's home? And,
Yeah,
I never really have found it geographically, but I have found a home in terms of finding like-minded people
yeah,
and people who see the world the way I do. Much like you, Danny. This is why our conversations always flow with such ease. And so I think I really found a home there. Um, I kind of worked my way quickly through my academic career. I was actually 16 when I started college. Ended up being 19 when I left. I think there were many of my peers who could have done a similar thing. I was trying to get out of a household that was a bit oppressive, and so it dawned on me that um, I had an ability to make my life better, and I just went for it.
fabulous. Another place we share is in how quickly we went through things. I dropped out of college at 18 after taking all the courses I would have needed for a psychology degree and realizing that's not what I wanted.
Right.
Um, do you feel you operate more from your head or from your heart?
Definitely from my head, and I've been trying to fix that. A lot of good friends have told me that I need to be more heart driven, and certainly being a father has taught me to be more heart driven. But I have had a tendency to be very analytical, very cerebral, and a lot of close friends, people I value, people whose opinion I really value, have told me that I need to be more heart led. So that's definitely a work in progress.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Why do they tell you that?
I think because they see that I have a tendency to be very self-critical. I don't really take that step back and honor my accomplishments. Um, if there's a course of action I'm contemplating taking, I'm thinking about it more from a rationality perspective as opposed to what it might mean for me. Um, uh, from a heart perspective, it could just be, expression of love or receiving love, and that's an afterthought for me. It's not something I lead with, but I'm working on getting better.
It's so interesting because I haven't known you very long, very short, in fact. Obviously, you're on 50 conversations with 50 strangers. I don't know you very well, but the way you come across to me is a beautiful balance of head and heart. There, every word that you say, you can feel your heart in it, and you can feel how much you feel. And
Mm.
so, I may be one of the people that, if we were to have further conversation, would encourage you to not move too far from where you are.
Oh, that's
Um,
beautiful. That's
but
great to hear, Danny. Thank you.
but to sit in the place where you are and just allow it to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think so much of the time we spend our lives trying to be other than we are, when what we are is so beautiful.
Mm.
So I don't want to go against any counsel you've received, but just from a fat guy sitting in California here, I can just tell you what I see.
Well, truth be told, some of those other earlier comments are dated a bit as I now think about it. And so, in some ways, you're sharing with me that I've arrived at a destination that I'd like to be at.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
actually really great to hear.
yeah.
And in
We
some
keep
ways, it's great that we don't know each other that well.
Yeah, it is great that it's the beauty of what happens when strangers come in. We don't know each other's stories well enough. We only just meet each other for what we see.
Right.
It's one of the beautiful things that happens in this room. Would you say you're a leader or a follower?
My first instinct would be to say I'm a leader, um, but I also admire strong leadership, and I'm willing to be a follower to strong leadership. Um, I have a tendency to get very emotional in sort of uh, consumable culture of film and TV or series when a hero or heroine does the right thing.
Yeah.
Because I think in my life, I've just personally experienced such a dearth of that in terms of leaders that were around me. But I actually take it very seriously. And when you do take it seriously, it always seems like there might be a penalty you're paying, but in the long run, it works out really well. And I'll share this anecdote. When I was a partner in my private equity fund, um, we had this situation where we had to go through these investment committee calls with the managing partners of the fund, and so they had to approve the deals. And one of them seemed to be in just a cantankerous mood, so he asked the question, "Who did these numbers?" And I immediately said, and my associate was there in the room, and my analyst as well. And I knew the associate had done it, and I said, "Well, if it's correct, then the associate did it. If it's wrong, then I did it." And
Oh,
they were flabbergasted. And of course, my associate and analysts were like, "What just happened?"
that's right.
After that, Danny, just about every associate analyst wanted to work with me.
Yeah, of
I
course.
became the popular partner
Yeah.
for deals. And it was just simply, what came to mind was Nelson Mandela, who had so many wonderful sayings, but one of them was the mark of a true leader is when everything goes well, he gives the credit to his team. When it goes badly, he assumes all the responsibility.
I love that. I
And
love it.
that seems so natural to me. And I also, I didn't like the fact that he was attacking my team member. So
Right.
I was going to stand in the middle of that. And
Yeah,
um,
but all that takes courage, and especially like when I look at leadership today, and we could look in any place. We could look in equity firms. We could look in healthcare. We could look in science. We could look in self help. We could look in on almost every category that we look at. The lowest hanging fruit and the easiest one to look at is politics right now.
yeah,
And without caring what side of the equation you're on, we elect people to be our leaders, but our leaders lead within a silo that they don't have the courage to stand up to,
right.
if that makes sense. So whether you're a pro-Trumper or an anti-Trumper, he's done some really good things, but all the things he's done haven't been good.
Right.
And so the pro-Trumpers don't have the courage or the leadership to stand up and say, these things we are support you, and these things are really crass and bad, and we just will not support you in that, and we want to stand up to you and make that better.
Yeah.
And the Trump, the anti-Trumpers, don't see anything that he's done that's good. Every corner he turns, he gets hit with another wooden post. He just gets smashed. And I think, gosh, give the dog a bone every once in a while. Like, I mean, if someone said to me, Danny, over and over again, everything you're doing is bad, I would get defensive eventually, and I would say, hold on, like, screw you, I'm not even going to listen to you or whatever. So, in another conversation with another stranger in this same room, something emerged for me that I saw about myself that I wanted to share. And it's a little bit different, but it's the same. When I look at the person that I am today as a human being, I'm pretty happy with the man that I've become. I like the guy that's sitting here in front of me when I look in the mirror. But there's some things that I do that I just do out of the momentum of always having done it. And I don't have the courage to stand up to my own momentum and override it. I do for a couple of days, and then it goes back to the same things.
Well said.
And if I think about that, no wonder I've elected leaders who resonate with not being able to stand up to the momentum of their own silo, because I can't do that every time also. And so until I become stronger in my ability to lead myself, how can I expect someone else to lead my nation or my country or my state or my government in a way that's any different than I lead myself? I would love your thoughts on that.
I think it's beautiful and really potent. And, change always starts with us. That's really what we can control. We can't control what our politicians and our leaders do, but in terms of our reaction to them and how we perceive and sort of modeling good behavior, but even that you're basically stamping out any kind of hypocrisy, and by being how you expect others to be, gives you the kind of moral alignment that is the right pulpit from which to offer critique
Yeah.
and make suggestions. So I absolutely love that. And what you've done as well, Danny, is that you've kept your ego in check. You've analyzed it and you've come up with a very thoughtful analysis and said, this is where I'm doing some things that the ideal version that I give myself is someone who is keeping my ego in check and having the courage to break the inertia or the
Yeah.
momentum of prior behavior. And it's interesting, so timely in a way. The name of my podcast is Achieve, and I intentionally have the I as lowercase. And maybe if you haven't had a chance to see the logo yet, we also have a brain on top and a heart underneath, and they're both emitting these signals, like cell phone signals or Wi-Fi signals to each other, and the message being that our heart and our mind can be connected best when our ego is in check, so a lowercase I, and that is how we achieve.
I love that.
So it's just so appropriate for what you're describing and sharing.
So anybody who's listening to this now, I want you to go to Aseem Giri's podcast, Achieve, subscribe to it, and start to listen to some of those episodes. That's a must do right now.
Well, especially when we get Danny's episode up there, which I can't
Th-
wait to have and
thank
present
you.
to the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, with all that's going on in the world, we ask this question, we glaze over it by saying fine, and we're great, and everything's going okay. But this world's in chaos right now. It was a few moments ago that the Me Too movement was here, and we had to reevaluate the way men treat women in the world.
Yep.
And hopefully women looked at the way they treat men of power as well, but I get in trouble for saying that a little bit. But where everybody takes responsibility for the way we treat each other. Then we have this virus that is sweeping through, which we have tons of people that are getting sick. We have less people dying. The percentages of people that are dying from it are not as high, are sort of small. And when you put together all of the coupling that's done, like if you have cancer and you have COVID, you've died of COVID. If
Right.
you have a heart attack and you have COVID, you've died of COVID. So it's really not quite certain what those actual numbers are. But even if all those numbers are there, and I don't mean to belittle the amount of people that have died, there have been a lot of people that have died. 600,000 people have died
Yeah.
globally. I don't mean to belittle that at all, but there doesn't seem to be as much death as there is sickness
Right.
from this virus, as far as we know yet. And then we have these race protests
Right.
where black and brown people are standing up and saying, like, we matter too. What the heck is going on? We have people trying to defend the Confederate flag and the Confederate statues. And I mean, we're in, like, there's no place where we're not in turmoil.
Yeah, it's true.
What do you think the world's trying to say to us?
Wow. We got to break the momentum, just like you're doing with yourself, Danny. We as a world, as a human race, have to break the momentum. The continual uh, subjugation of people based on their skin color, that's hasn't been acceptable for ever, and we need to come to terms with it, that there are these unconscious biases or insidious ways of behaving that need to be stamped out, and it's not going to be done if it's business as usual. We have to shine a floodlight on that behavior so that people can evaluate their biases, and that's so critical. There's a apologies for that.
It's okay.
There's a line of thinking that in terms of how we've treated our planet, it hasn't been well. Environmental concerns and so forth, and this is the planet telling us that we need to back off. And with the horrible deaths that we have had, there have been some benefits in the sort of lull in activity in terms of air pollution and ocean pollution. So it's interesting to conjecture that maybe that's nature's way of telling us that it's sick. We've made it very sick, and so we need to make amends. Um, I hope that, you talked about the Me Too movement, and of course it had a lot of press, and I hope that remains in people's thinking and informs and limits behavior. I hope it's not something that we just had a moment of and we forget and go back to old ways of behaving. And so, similar concepts with Black Lives Matter movement. I hope that there's more permanent change that comes as a result of this, and not just, well, that happened then and now we're moving on. But I think those are the messages that we need to do on a large scale, what you're doing personally, and sort of break the momentum and the inertia of harmful behavior and conduct.
Thank you. Thank you for always everything, all the kind words you say of me. I appreciate that so much. And
Absolutely.
um, what do you think the world is trying to say to you personally in this time?
Keep going.
Love that.
Keep going. You've, I just started my podcast on May 1st, and kind of started it reluctantly. Didn't have this grand mission that, okay, I'm going to do this. I kind of got it started with a different purpose in mind, to promote a wellness business. And suddenly I was awash with joy in terms of these interactions I was having, and the feedback I was getting from people about how much they enjoyed the conversations. And so I think the universe is telling me, keep going, that
Yeah.
I can be a conduit or a platform for people to get their story out. And it's always so heartwarming when people say, gosh, this has been so therapeutic. And you got things out of me that I never talk about. Um, that's, Danny, where I feel really accomplished. It's
Yeah.
that I could create a safe enough space and be present with somebody and ask them the probing questions and make connections in their life. That's really when I feel so accomplished, when they say, gosh, I never thought about it that way or never traced it back to that. Then I feel like I've done something significant. So I think the universe is telling me, keep going.
I love that. And I think it's the work that you're doing that will bring the world back together again by just one person at a time, one conversation at a time.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's our work, right, Dan?
I agree, but
50 conversations with 50 strangers. That is healing.
I, I love it. I love it. If you had 1 minute to address the world and the world you knew was listening, what would be the one thing or two things? What would you say in that 1 minute to the world that you've always wanted to say?
It would be to avoid thinking about people as faceless generalities. I shouldn't think of you as Jewish. You shouldn't think of me as Indian origin. Think about me as a father, as a brother, as a son. Think about the women in our lives as mothers, as daughters. Um, when we think about people in terms of those relationships,
Yeah.
it becomes very difficult to hate. When we take the face away, make them faceless, it's easier to do that, and then that's where a lot of zealotry comes from. And so that's what I would say to the world.
What a beautiful way of imaging it for people,
Mm.
to just put the face back on the person that you're talking to.
You have to. That's the only. I mean, my family was deeply impacted by the partition of India when the British splintered Pakistan and India. My grandfather was a Hindu living in a Muslim majority area, what is present day Pakistan. And Hindu families were being murdered left and right, as were Muslim families on the Indian side of the border. But it was my grandfather's Muslim friends that got him and my very young father and my young aunts and uncles out of the country. It's because they saw him as a neighbor, not because they saw him as a Hindu.
Yeah. Aseem, I'm going to ask you to send me all your links so we can put it in there as well as a headshot. But how do people, if they've been intoxicated by this beautiful man sitting in front of me and want to know more about you because they don't want to be a stranger anymore to you, how would they get in touch with you?
I would ask people to visit achievepodcast.com because I don't think I'm nearly as interesting as the guests that I've had on the show. So hear their stories and be inspired by them. But if you go to the contact section of the website, your email will get to me.
Perfect. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here with us, for taking the time, for coming out of nowhere and becoming a friend of mine, for all the support that you give me and all the love that you show to me. And I hope you feel that back. Um,
Danny, I really do. Thank you for holding the space for me to be able to share about myself. And thank you for writing the book you did. I do believe in the mosaic. And at the end of the day, it is all about connecting.
Love it. So, what's beautiful in the conversation, you can feel the mutual love and respect we have for each other. 2 months ago, we didn't even know each other existed. So, for those of you who are listening, if you like the show, please share it with your friends. Please share it around. And also, be courageous.
Hmm.
Go up to someone you don't know, whether it's online or in real, and just ask them how they're doing with no thought of trying to change them, fix them, help them, do something else. Just ask them, how are you? You might be surprised. You might find that people that were strangers instantly become friends, or not. They might not. But you never know unless you take the opportunity, right? So,
Absolutely.
so I invite and encourage every one of you to go and meet somebody that you haven't met, or even have a conversation with someone you do know and really sit and listen to them. Take the time to really listen to what it is they want to say and see what happens. Aseem, is there one last thing you want to say as we head out?
I really appreciate what you've said about encouraging people to have courage. I think that was really beautiful, and I'm going to trumpet that and echo it.
Okay. Thank you again so much for your time, guys. Strangers that are out there who we don't know, if you want to have a conversation, you can have it with Aseem, you can have it with me. We both do the same work. Please get in touch with one of us and let's set up times to have conversations. Until the next stranger comes in the room, which for me is about 1 minute away, I encourage you, get out, interact, meet other people. Um, in a world that is divided, these conversations bring us together. Thank you for sharing your time, Aseem. Once again, thank you everybody for listening, for sharing this with your friends. Until the next stranger, see you soon.